which is on the web, you can read it. And Two Dogmas talks about this very square, the analytic-synthetic distinction between analytic truths and synthetic truths. And what essentially comes out of that is the recognition that we have there's actually several names for it, but quantifier exchange, it's a logical rule that says you can change a quantifier. Be safe out there. You can change a quantifier from a universal to an existential, and an existential quantifier back to a universal. And before Brandon got upset with me last class, I put at least one line up on the board for that. So if I have whatever you pick, for whatever you pick, everything is this, right? That turns out to be equivalent to, it's not the case that there is one that is not that. And if I take negation here, say for anything you pick, it's not the case, da 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 da, that's equivalent to saying that it's not the case that there is one that is that. And if I say it's not the case that for anything you pick, da 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 da, notice that's different, right? That is equivalent to saying that there exists one that is not that. And then the last possibility is if it's not the case that for anything you pick, it's not that, that's equivalent to saying there is one. So if you see the pattern, you just use what's called De Morgan's laws, and you can move the quantifiers in or out. And what's that mean for philosophy? That means that the square that we've inherited from Aristotle on, it's still useful, it still works as far as analyzing statements, but at the same time, the impression that people had, the philosophers had all along, was that meant that there were two types of knowledge: universal type knowledge, definitional type knowledge, and specific new information kinds of knowledge. Remember the issue with Kant facing David Hume was that David Hume indicated that you couldn't have synthetic knowledge that was a priori, and that seemed to be the basis for metaphysics. And so what you had to do is figure out, well, how do we have a priori synthetic information, says Kant. And he came up with, his categories of understanding, his categories of judgment, and so on. Well, thank you, Quine. Now we realize that actually you have equivalences from the one quantifier to the other. So everything you would say with a universal quantifier actually equates to a synthetic judgment. And the synthetic judgments actually equate to a universal judgment. So as a pragmatist, what that tells us is we're always learning. We never actually have a definitional knowledge about something that we shouldn't continue to pay attention to because we might be wrong about it. So we're always looking for a new synthetic information bit about something that we might think of as universal. So we keep working on it. So quantifier exchange rules, hopefully hopefully I have them. Notice if you see a font where you have an upside down A, that's equivalent to this one. That's just another, it depends on what fonts were available to the editors, etc. And notice when you use that, you don't need to use the parentheses. You could still do the theorems. So basically you could prove what Quine shows in his text in Two Dogmas. So Two Dogmas explains this in English, which is interesting. Okay. Think. So I have a page on Bertrand Russell. A lot of people like him because he is controversial in a lot of ways. This is, if you're into a Decalogue is 10. So you've got, instead of the 10 Commandments, he was against the 10 Commandments. Instead, he created his own Decalogue. Do not feel absolutely certain of anything. Do not think it worthwhile to proceed by concealing evidence, for the evidence is sure to come to light. Never try to discourage thinking, for you are sure to succeed. When you meet with opposition, even if it should be from your husband or your children, endeavor to overcome it by argument and not by authority. For a victory dependent upon authority is unreal and illusory. Have no respect for the authority of others, for there are always contrary authorities to be found. Do not use power to suppress opinions you think pernicious, for if you do, the opinions will suppress you. Do not fear to be eccentric in opinion, for every opinion now accepted was once eccentric. Find more pleasure in intelligent dissent than in passive agreement, for if you value intelligence as you should, the former implies a deeper agreement than the latter. Be scrupulously truthful, even if the truth is inconvenient, for it is more inconvenient when you try to conceal it. Do not feel envious of the happiness of those who live in a fool's paradise, for only a fool will think that it is happiness. You get the idea. Sin in the Bishops, Persecution, Russell and the Future of Science, etc. He did win a Nobel Peace Prize, and the speech he gave at the Nobel ceremony is on YouTube, so you can actually listen to him and so on. Pretty fascinating in lots of ways. Quine, we call him a neo-pragmatist because we feel like, well, we've had pragmatism for so long, we have to have something to say about it. So we call it neo, which just means new pragmatism. But it's not really that different from old pragmatism, right? So he freely employs the methods of logical analysis from the Vienna Circle. The Vienna Circle I didn't talk about. They were logical positivists. They thought that they were basically based on the Tractatus, among other things. There were conflicts. One of the leaders of the circle was assassinated on the step to the building. So there were things associated that way. The logical positivists thought that the meaning of a statement was its method of verification. and that if a statement couldn't be scientifically verified, it was meaningless. So it's meaningless if you don't have a method of verifying a statement. Biggest criticism of their thinking was that you can't verify the statement, that the meaning of the statement is its method of verification. So that's funny. Yeah. And I think if you have a room full of geniuses, they might have thought of that, but they didn't. That's just, to me, that's funny. But I'm weird, I guess. Quine challenged the distinction between analytical statements and synthetic statements, which has been considered self-evident according to the dominant empiricism of this century, actually way back. Dr. Quine pointed out there was no firm basis for such a distinction. I don't remember where the heck I got all of this stuff. Maybe from this page, actually. Nope, that page is no longer there. GeoCities is gone. Statements concerning the outer world are not separate and isolated, but will be subject to sensory judgment as a collective whole known as the Quine-Duhem thesis. He's not by himself, of course. There's others at Harvard that were involved in that. So two dogmas of empiricism greatly influenced future directions of both theory of knowledge, epistemology, and ontology, theory of what there is, on what there is. And Quine wrote books on these subjects. By the way, the easiest book I think that he wrote is called The Web of Belief, which he was encouraged to write by an English professor at Harvard, because the English professor asked him, will you help me write a book about how science works for ordinary people? Well, you know, ordinary Harvard people. Which I don't know. You think that they're drunk all the time, so I don't know if they're ordinary. Sorry, that's a critique. It's probably just true, though. They won't go to classes, they just go to parties and get drunk. According to a book I read. I have been to Harvard. I was accepted, actually, into the Harvard religion department to go for seminary, and instead, as you know, I joined the Army. Because I didn't want to be broke the whole rest of my life. I wanted to be rich. So I joined the Army, which is, it worked. It's just silly. Okay. So, denotation is when you have a definite description, like the jacket that you were wearing is pink. Everyone knows that I succeeded in referring to that particular object. Language has that capability. It's harder when you talk about our greatest value. What is that? You know, or the round square cupola on Berkeley College. The round square cupola on Berkeley College. Or Noam Chomsky's very famous something green ideas sleep furiously. I can't remember the entire quote. How does it go? It's not just green ideas, there's more to it. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. There's Noam Chomsky's example of a very difficult definite description. I have to quit because there are people waiting for the tour. Questions? Was this fun? Next. next class I'm supposed to talk about Quine, but we've pretty much done Quine, so I think what I'll begin doing is going through like the philosophers on my list and stuff. So that we can, yes.
How like strict is the due date for the final paper?
As strict as everything else I've done,
Okay.
not strict at all.
Okay.
I thought it was on the 7th.
I thought it was on the 3rd, so
That's
Should-
what I thought.
Send it to me before I die,
okay.
so I can put in your grade.